Let us understand how to use MySQL database as a source to read and write data. To connect to any database, whether it is MySQL or Postgre, to connect to any RDBMS database, we need the following informations. That is the host name and port, user ID, password with the required permissions, and driver. The driver will be very specific to the database that we are connecting to. In this particular example, we are going to see how to connect to MySQL database, read data, and store data into the database. I have MySQL installed in a specific machine with the IP address 192.168.0.103. That is my own system. And I have a workbench to browse the tables and database available within the database. I have MySQL workbench where I have a database employees. And this particular database is created as a part of the MySQL. There is a sample database provided. MySQL uses or provides this sample database. For learning purpose, we can use this sample database and we can create the same database within the MySQL installation. So that's going to create a number of tables. We can use the same database employees. Within that we have a number of tables. To connect from Spark SQL we can use. And to connect to any database we need the driver. And MySQL also provides the driver where we can download the driver. We can download the MySQL driver from this specific location. If you get into this location, it's going to give you the option to download the latest MySQL connector. I am running MySQL version 5. So I'm going to click this link looking at the previous version. So here you should have an option to select the Java based connector. In case if you are not able to find the version 5, look for the previous general available versions. It will list the version 5.x. Here I have the platform independent version where you can download and unzip this jar file. So if you unzip it, you're going to have the jar file something similar to this. So I downloaded the MySQL connector and I unzipped it, and it is available within the specific location. And I have the jar file, the connector. So this is what the library that I need to connect to the database along with the password, user ID, host name, and the port. And the MySQL database is running in the default port 3306. So I'm going to connect to the database. Let me open the Spark shell. And while opening the Spark shell, I'm going to mention what are all the jar files that I wanted to use it as a reference. So I'll mention the jar file and the location where I have unzipped. So this is the jar file I have in this specific location. That means the shell that is going to get started will use this particular jar file as reference. And the data within the MySQL is going to be a structured data. I'm going to read the table employees. The employee is going to have these columns, and I have a table employee. I'm going to use this specific data to do the samples. I will use the Spark session that is available as a Spark, and I'll store the result within a data frame. The value of that particular data frame, MySQL. So this is a variable of type val. And variable could be of different types, val and var within scalar. Val means it's immutable, var means it's mutable. And as we discussed earlier, any data frames that's going to get created will be immutable. So we can have that as a val. I'm going to have a variable, and since scalar is type inference, automatically it will infer it as of type data frame. I'm going to use the Spark session. Within the Spark session, I have a method called read. So now we should start using the API. If I open the Spark API, I can get into the version of API same as the version that I have installed. I am using the version 2.3.1. I have opened the API. It's very easy to get into this particular location. I can get into the Spark page. As a part of documentation, you can get into the Scala version. That will take you to the latest version. In case if you are looking for going for the previous versions, check the previous version, the link for the documentation, and get into the API documentation of Scala. Here I'm going to work with the Spark session now. I can search for the Spark session. It's of type object and class. So within this, I'm going to have a method, a read. The read will provide me a data frame reader. So I'll check what is there within the data frame reader. Now I'll say read. And within data frame reader, I have different methods. I'm going to use this specific method. What type of source I wanted to use? I'm going to use the source JDBC. Format, I'm going to use of type JDBC. And I need to pass the details on the URL, the driver, the table that I wanted to connect with, the username, password, and all any required options I can pass. So I'll pass option URL, I'm going to use JDBC, ODBC, of type database MySQL, and it is available in the location 92.168.0.103. That's the IP address of my system where I have installed the MySQL database, and this is the port. And what database I want to connect with? Employees. Then I'll give the next option on driver. I want to use the driver com.mysql.jdbc.driver. The next option I will provide on the table I want to connect with. DB table. The table I want to connect with is employees. Next option, I will pass the user ID. Option user. This is the user ID already I have set up with the required permissions. MySQL Workbench gives all the option to manage different users, and the privileges needs to be provided. So I have a user MySQL user which has the permissions to connect from any system, and it has administrator privilege as well. That means it has all the permissions on all the schemas. And I'm going to provide the password. So these are all the required options that needs to be provided. And we don't have secure connection between this Spark shell and the MySQL database. So Spark shell will give an error saying I'm trying to connect with MySQL database with insecure connection. So it will give a warning. So to suppress the warning, I can give the option don't use SSL. SSL, I'll make it as false. And I want to load the data from this particular database. So I have provided the format I want to read, and the URL, user ID, password, driver, all the required informations. And that's going to provide me a data frame. And we can customize still further while reading how many number of partitions and what is the upper limit for each batch read. Now I'm going to leave the system to decide itself how many partitions, how many tasks to run. I am providing the basic required informations. So it would connect with the database, read all the data, and have that as a data frame. I have a connection exception. I'm going to find out what went wrong. So it's a communication link failure. I'm going to confirm on the IP address of my machine. So the IP address is 192.168.0.101. Let me go ahead and change the IP address. Well, it connected with the database and it got this particular data frame, and automatically it inferred the type. So this is because the Hive is not configured. I am getting this warning. You can safely ignore this warning for the time being. I'm going to check what are all the data available within this particular database. Data frame not show. That's going to display the records available within this particular data frame. So I'm able to see the top 20 records. I can check the jobs that got executed. So the show, it executed with a single task, and it got the result from the database. I can register this particular data within the data frame as a temporary view, so that I can use the ANSYS SQL query to process the data within this particular data frame. I'm going to have a table called top employees, which is very similar to what I have with only the columns employee number, first name, last name, and gender. Let me truncate this particular table. Since I'm going to drop only the data within this particular table, it is empty. Just to do the demo, I'm going to use this particular data frame and register this as a temporary view. That means for this particular session, this will be registered as a view or as a temporary table. So let's say data frame underscore MySQL. I'm going to create a temporary view against this particular data frame. Create or replace temp view, and what's going to be the name of that particular temporary table. I'll call that as employees. Now I can use any query that I want against this particular temporary view. Within the Spark session, I'm going to find the SQL query. So the query, the syntax, it looks very similar to the normal SQL syntax we use with any database. Select count star from employees. That's going to get me the count. So that's going to be an integer. Count temp dot. So there are around 300,000 records within this particular table employees. I'm going to select the top 10 records after sorting it based on the hire date. So this particular table is having a hire date, the employee table. It's having these columns: employee number, birth date, first name, last name, gender, and hire date. I'm going to sort all the records based on the hire date in the descending order, and I'm going to pick the top 10 records, maybe for some XYZ analysis purpose, and I will insert that into the top employees table so that we can prove how to write the data into the table as well from the Spark SQL. So I'm going to pick the top 10 records. I'm going to use the Spark session. I'm going to find the SQL query, write the query, select. I'm going to select the employee number, first name, last name, gender. From the table employees, I want to order the records by hire date in the descending order. I'm going to limit the result to 10 records. So Spark SQL going to optimize this particular query and generate the record transformations and get that executed. And the execution is lazy. So the execution will come into picture only when I am going to do either show or write this particular result somewhere. Let me display the records. Top 10 scores emp dot show. So the data frame name dot show will show me these records. And how this got executed, I can see through the job window from the web UI, and web UI runs in the port 4040. So here, what is the stage, what are all the stage it has to get through and how it's going to execute, we can see those details. Now I have these records. I'm going to write these records into a table called top underscore employees. As of now it is empty. I'm going to write this into the table. So I'll say data frame dot, so this is the data frame name dot write. So the data frame should have a method called write. We can check that from the UI. If I get into the data frame, I should have a method called write. And data frame is of type dataset. So make sure. So this is of type dataset. So here I should see a method called write. I have a method write, and that's going to give me a data frame writer. And within the data frame writer, I'm going to give the format. What is the format that I'm going to write? I'm going to write it into a database, that is MySQL database, using the JDBC. So I'll provide the URL, username, password, all the information. Let me write it. So I'm going to say the data frame name dot write dot format JDBC, and I'm going to give the option. What is the URL, the driver, and then the table where I want to write to, and I'm going to provide the username and then password. And in the write option, I can give various modes how I am going to write it. So while writing it in the JDBC format, I can give the option whether I want to overwrite or the mode that I'm going to write. I'm going to overwrite or append to the existing data, or in case if any error, what needs to be done. So various modes I can write the data. So I'm going to mention the mode as overwrite. So any data, if it is existing, it will overwrite. And I'm going to mention don't use the SSL. Let's say save. So data frame writer, within that I should have a method save. So it's going to give me a data frame writer. So save method will save the data frame into that specific table or whatever the source that we have defined. It's going to make connection to the database and writes the data into the database in the table that we have defined, that we can verify from the MySQL workbench. Yes, I have got the 10 records within the table top underscore employees. So as a summary, we are able to connect to the MySQL database from the Spark shell by providing the driver, what driver to use. And before starting the shell, we provided the jar file reference. That's very, very important. Otherwise, you're going to get an exception, class not found. So while starting the Spark shell, we provided the reference to the jar file to the database with which we are connecting to. So having said this, we can connect to any RDBMS, either it's a Oracle database or Postgre database, we can connect. So in a summary, we connected to a database, we read some data, we had that as a data frame, and from the data frame we extracted a piece of data out of it and we stored within a MySQL database. So that closes that closes the loop of reading as well as writing.